I'm not sure if either of them will be attending tonight. Madam Clerk, have you had anything?
Councillor Coleman will not be attending.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, attendance has been taken. You'll see we have a revised agenda. Item C has been withdrawn, 4C. Motion to approve the agenda, Councillor Pierce, Councillor Miller. Any other questions, concerns? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We have, please declare a pecuniary interest at the time if required. Delegates petitions. We have Mr. James Young and Councillor Miller.
I'm trying to get an item on the agenda before we approve the agenda. I just wanted to put one matter under other business, please.
One matter under other business.
Yes. Which we've already discussed tonight. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving forward, we have a delegation, James Young and A.H. Hay, Southern Harbor Climate Change Impact on the Long-Term Economy of Brant County. Please come up to the podium, please. I believe it's RWDI and Southern Harbor.
Correct. Thank you,
Gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman. What we'd like to talk to you about today, I think Florida's been on everybody's mind with climate change and the big storm. So we'd like to talk to you today about what is in store for Brant County. Okay, so how do I move this forward now? Page up.
And then just down.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I'm Jim Young from RWDI. I'm a climate, weather, and air quality specialist. My partner in crime here is Alec Hay, who is with Southern Harbor. He's an infrastructure and development expert. What we want to talk to you about today is trying to put some resilience in your, into a strategy for a sustainable future. If you understand the real impact of climate change on your community, and then you can look at the impact on your economy, both today and into the future. So first of all, I'd just like to talk about how things are changing. And if you look at these pictures, they represent changing risk. And they basically show that history is not a good predictor of the future. So starting from the top left, we have floods, tornadoes, wildfires. The bottom left, aging population, depopulation, and technological revolution. And these are all, majority of these are from the Canadian disaster damage extracts. And this slide is really all about change. And what we want to tell you about today is that with change there are opportunities. So if you recognize the changes and how they affect your community, you're in a better position to address them. So this is just a preliminary indication of what's going to happen to the Brantford area by the 2040s. And if you look at the top part of the graph, you'll see that it's going to be significantly warmer. The rainfall will be about the same. Snowfall will be much less. And then if we look at extremes, the maximum temperature and minimum temperature will show that it's getting warmer. Virtually the snowfall will be about the same. And in terms of wind chill, the weather is just going to be overall warmer. Alec.
One of the things to understand about any form of infrastructure risk is that consequence is reasonably foreseeable. I frequently give evidence and I demonstrate that the consequences of an event were reasonably foreseeable. We understand our own infrastructure, we understand our own operations, and so in the event of A happening, a sequence B, C, D, E was entirely foreseeable. What is less foreseeable is the likelihood of the event happening. So for example, you may recognize the area. This is Calgary, the downtown of Calgary. Now Environment Canada had advised some 4 days beforehand that there was a high likelihood of flooding. Later on, the flood did happen, but they weren't quite prepared for it. Now, In this particular rendering here, you'll see the direct and indirect consequences of that flood. We had to provide evidence for a person located in the lighter shaded area. They weren't flooded, but they lost power. Their people couldn't come into work, and they wanted to claim for business interruption, loss of business income. The insurance company said no, and it was challenged, it went to court, and we were providing the evidence for it. We were able to prove that it was reasonably foreseeable that they would lose power, even though they weren't flooded, and they had no reasonable claim on insurance, because they had chosen to ignore the risk themselves. Now, in this particular map, see the dark hatched red? That is the floodplain. The deeper pink that surrounds the river, that is the surface flooding arising from a levee topping or a levee breach. And then the grayish pink that surrounds it is the power outage arising from that surface flooding. So in that particular case, 2 of the transformer stations were in the surface flooding area, and so therefore they had to be turned off. Therefore, power was lost to those areas. It was entirely foreseeable. But if you have something like that, that is entirely foreseeable, it allows you to plan. It allows you to say, I'm going to be affected by a higher frequency of these events. This is what these events mean. And therefore, as part of my economic strategy, I need to make sure I have these skills at my disposal. I need to have these people in my council with this capacity, these capabilities. It also provides an understanding of how the economy can be diversified without incurring additional risk. And finally, it gives you the opportunity to understand where to invest in infrastructure and where to just let the infrastructure slowly fade out. So prioritization of preventative maintenance over breakdown maintenance, for example. The other thing that it does, and the mayor of San Francisco was very clear about this, he said that he was put into office on the promise of sustainable economic development, but the thing that will eject him from office faster than anything else is depopulation. If there is a loss of confidence, there is a loss of social license in the municipality, high-value tenants will leave, businesses will leave, and the next generation will leave. Now, for San Francisco, which is a tiny municipality surrounded by huge municipalities in the Bay Area, this was a very compelling argument. And social license carries most of the consequence arising from climate change. We need to attract the right talent if any community is to grow and develop. But also, that community needs to change its strategic partnerships. One with the neighboring communities, but also the strategic partnership that exists with the higher authority in the province and with industry. And we need to work out how those partnerships need to change. But for example, that prediction that I showed you about consequence and the measurement of consequence also has a flip side. It enables any executive to discharge their first fiduciary responsibility, which is protection against loss. Or in this case, it's managing that leakage. If you manage that loss of social license so that you maintain social license, you maintain confidence in the assurance of a community's continuity, you guard against the reduction in tax receipts. And a reduction in tax receipts basically means the community starts to implode and the municipality becomes unviable to maintain. But every location decision that is made has inherent risk. And it becomes a question of balancing that inherent risk with the investment that you wish to make. So it informs the strategy that you have. You already have a very clear strategy mapped out. Understanding the risk exposures over time enable you to understand how best to enable that strategy and realize the vision that you've laid out. It informs land use planning and zoning. It also informs business optimization, so where businesses should be and what balance of businesses would be beneficial for the long-term survival of the municipality. Now, working with Dialogue some time ago, we put this into a community resilience planning framework. It's an established process. We don't have the time to discuss it here in any detail, but fundamentally it's driven by what the population perceives as their future, what is important to them. Because if they don't have ownership of it, it doesn't matter what a council does. It'll never deliver. And so it needs to be realized with the population supporting it. It's derived from an example of Moncton. Now, Moncton is the fastest growing economy east of Toronto, and it has been, and it's been sustained for the last 15 years. That was done using these principles. Your neighbors are currently looking at how they are going to manage risk under climate change. And that is just a proposal, it's not what they're doing. But one of the proposals was because of their location, their strategic location, they can become a new agricultural food hub for this region. Because don't forget that the trade agreement with Europe is about to kick in. And that free flow of market goods and agricultural goods will kick off. So understanding your risk exposure with climate change enables you to make these strategic decisions. Now, the one proviso that I'll give you is that your world is changing. How you work, how you live is changing as well. Through information and communication technology, we're concentrating value. We have a far greater exposure to loss than we have ever had in history. And it's at such a level now that, for example, the government of Canada cannot bail out Ontario if Ontario goes south. The loss exposure, the value at risk is far higher than it has ever been. And you're in a position to manage that. So I'll just leave you with this one thought. The past is no predictor of the future in this particular case. Don't define the problem that you face by what's familiar and the tools you have at your disposal. Work out what the problems are, understand the problems, and then be willing to design the tools that you need to solve it, to address it. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is there any questions to the presenters, please? Councillor Miller, then Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Quick question. Be the third slide, no, fifth slide is climate impacts on Brantford area by 2040s. What was your source for that, and when was that published?
That came out of a study that I did for the City of Toronto, the Greater Toronto Area, about 2 years ago, and it's based on the data for the 2040s. We ran a climate model hourly to come up with climate statistics, and Brantford just happened to be captured on the edge of that grid.
Okay. What do you see as, because it doesn't say it here, what do you see as the average sea increase?
The average?
Temperature increase?
It's here. So this is, oh, sorry, I don't have that. I don't have it on this slide. If I remember correctly, it was around 6 degrees?
C.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the delegation. Thank you. That was an interesting proposal that you've put in front of us. Where are you based?
The headquarters of the RWDI is in Guelph, and ALEC is headquartered in Toronto.
Is in Guelph as well?
No, Toronto.
Toronto. And are you making this presentation to all councils, or?
No, we've just made it to Brant County.
I wondered why you chose Brant.
Okay, I'll tell you why. I attended the a meeting and met one of your councillors there, and he invited us to come and make a presentation to the Development Committee, to the Economic Development Committee, which we did, and then he recommended that we come here and make this recommendation, this presentation here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
That was interesting.
Councillor Pierce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, thanks for that presentation. You made a statement that you said, you know, if A happens, then B, C, D are inevitably happen. You can predict that kind of stuff. Okay, I understand that. I think we can all understand that, yes, if certain events happen, you can predict what's going to happen afterwards. But I think the more important question here, and I'm wondering how you can help us with this, is how do you determine to what extreme the B, C, D, and E happens? Because it's, as you say, it's inevitable they're going to happen, but what factors can help us or help anybody determine, okay, to what extent are these following actions going to rear their heads, so to speak?
Well, it depends on the specific relationships you're talking about. Because you can't just say, this is a standard application and it applies everywhere. It depends on the functions that you're interested in and their relationship with their neighbors, context, and the next sequence in line. So let's take, for example, emergency services. Mm-hmm. If you build a fire hall and it's in the flood area, you can recognize that, but you can say that the fire tender, when it is deployed, is going to be much slower wading through that water, and so therefore the response area will be reduced. Because you can say that it has to go along these paths, these routes, to get to where it needs to go. So therefore, you may be able to say, within 15 minutes, it can get to this area, but when we've just got some flooding on those streets, the area of coverage within 15 minutes reduces down to, say, 20% or 30% of the possible coverage. Okay. And those are direct calculations that you can make. But similarly, you can also say that if we lose power to a particular, say, a retirement home, where there is a dependency on elevators, and we follow the building code and it limits the amount of standby power provided for elevators. But does that mean after a prolonged power outage arising from an ice storm, everyone has to shelter in place? Does that mean we have to evacuate the old age people's homes? It's better if they can shelter in place, which means that we're now reorienting the emergency provisions, the services that are needed for that home in the event of that power outage. Now, the power outage, we know statistically that they happen with a certain frequency and duration. We also know what the extreme power outages are. So the current discussion is around a planning time of 4 days. That's a very different emergency generator deliverable, but also how you specify the building. How does it retain heat? So all of those things can be calculated just by saying, this event, what does it mean? Those relationships are clear.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, 4B, Mr. Henry Stoll. Review Highlands Parish Holdings Limited, Rosanny Homes, Mile Hill Development, Registration of Subdivisions, and the rest of it. Mr. Stoll, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of committee, with me tonight is Gary Norris, my partner in Riverview. Bill Lisk's beside him, and he's with Rosanny Homes, and John and Ken Edgar of Mile Hill Developments. I'm not going to ask and be here on a whole lot. I just want to say, just so you know, I bought 7 dozen cookies from Shirley for $35. So she doesn't really have a pecuniary interest, but she might have. I've already distributed them. Anyways, okay. Model home permits, we're working with staff, so we've asked that it be removed from this agenda. With respect to the approval of a registration of plans of subdivision, we've asked for that item to be deferred until either the October PAC meeting or the October CDC meeting, working initially with staff on the building permit side. So that's where we're at. There will be a submission to the county on Thursday from both CVD and Walter Feddy for the storm outlet on the burning property. So that work is expected to be done at that time. So I can answer questions individually afterwards if you like, but that's really where we're at, and we're working with Mark and Andre to get to the next steps in the next little while.
Thank you, Henry. Any questions for Henry? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Moving on, adoption, I guess we want to see what we want to do with these other items, right? Yes, Councillor Bohm?
I'll make a motion to receive the delegations.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Pierce. All questions or concerns? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 5A, adoption of previous minutes. Mover, Councillor Miller, seconded by Mayor Eddy. Questions or concerns? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Business arising from the minutes. Councillor Miller, please.
Question of clarification, Mr. Chair. Page 24 of our package, this would be the second page of the minutes. We had a presentation from Mr. Weaver on Crestwood Lake, and we moved that the matter be referred back to staff, and that the applicant owner be encouraged to submit the necessary planning applications. As far as the matter of referring back to staff, what exactly have we referred back to staff, and are we looking for something back from staff to us?
CAO Emerson, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. There's an in-camera item on your late starter agendas. Did you see that, Councilor Miller? Yeah, we can get into that whole thing there if you'd like.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving on. Consent items. 7A1. Citizen appointments update. There's a recommendation there. Do we have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Boma, Councillor Simons. Questions or concerns? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving on. B, consent items to be received. B1, 2, and 3. Councillor Pierce, seconder, please. Councillor Boma. Anyone like any of those pulled? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Miller?
Mr. Chair, I was going to move B2, that the County of Brant support the County Federation of Agriculture's request for resolution to, we've done that part?
Yeah, that's already been done.
Have we? Okay.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Committee reports, Economic Development Advisory Committee report, August 12th or 17th. There is a recommendation there. All in favor? Councillor Wheat, please. Thank you. Councillor Simons.
I'll second, and I'd like to speak to it too also.
Okay.
Please. Thank you.
Councillor Wheat, please.
I'm not going to support it. We've already directed staff to come back to the so this is premature, so I'm prepared to defeat it.
Thank you. Councillor Simons.
I'd like to make a motion that we receive it, and I won't be supporting it also because of the staff report that came forward from our CEO and Michael Bradley, and I'd like to have that report referred to the Economic Development for their review and find out where we're standing so that we're all on the same page together, because we're not right now by this.
Thank you. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I was looking at the minutes from the meeting, I noted there was a lot of members absent. When I counted those present and those absent, there wasn't a quorum for that meeting.
Yeah, there was.
Does the clerk want to comment on that?
Go ahead.
Some of the members listed aren't counting members for the quorum, so some of them are just representatives from, I believe one's from the Mississaugas of the New Credit. They're not actually appointed as members in terms of counting for quorum. They're like liaison members more than.
Well, there was 6 present and 6 absent.
Right, so at least one of them, looking back, sorry, 1 second here. I know at least one of them is actually not a member towards quorum. Member Salt, I believe, is a liaison from one of the First Nations. So they're invited to come. I think she's from the Mississaugas of the New Credit.
Member who, sorry?
Salt? Amy Salt?
That's correct.
And I believe she's just there as a liaison. She's not
That's correct.
actually an
Yes.
appointed member of the
She is a
committee.
liaison.
That's correct. Mayor Reddy?
Well, Mr. Chair, we're dealing with 8A, is that correct?
Correct, sir.
As you know, there have been many things, or several things happen since this resolution was passed by EDC. Speaking to the content of the recommendation before us, number one, that the County of Brant Council take a leadership approach to health care in Brant. By the actions taken by this council, we have indeed done that, and we are taking a leadership role, which is very important. Two, that updates to the committee on the Community Health Hub project be encouraged. Well, it's up to the Health Hub Board, committee, or whatever, to circulate their minutes as they wish, to whom they wish. So they could be requested for them, and I think that would be a better procedure. On the item 3, that County of Brant be prepared to support a feasibility study and the organization of the board for the Community Health Hub project. This is the important part of the resolution. And there are a number of things have happened. As you know, there is a new manager of the Brantford Health Care System. The board has been dismissed. The executive director, I believe that's his name, has been dismissed. And we at this time don't know the route that's going to be taken or the actions going to be taken by the person who is in charge, appointed by the Minister of Health to conduct the service, the health service.
And you're speaking of the Brant County Healthcare System?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
In addition to that, the LHINs have been directed by the minister to prepare a new system where there are sub-regions. This council, or the staff, has been approached by the director of the LHINs and wishes to meet. And a meeting is being arranged by our executive director. A number of other meetings have been arranged, and it's imperative that staff and some members that are appointed meet and recommendations come forward from those various meetings so that we know, one, where we stand, two, the direction that's being taken by those in charge of the healthcare system so that we can react to them. In other words, we will need a report for staff following the number of meetings that have been arranged that will be coming up, I believe, in the next 2 weeks. And I would ask Mr. Emerson if he would outline those meetings, the list of meetings that are there. All extremely important to have and to have the report from them. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so just to enlighten the committee, I sit on the FHT board, and the FHT met with the LHIN on September 7th and looked at discussions before the Brant Sub-Region Anchor Table meeting that was held. There was myself, Dr. McDonald, and Cindy Pratt, the CEO of the FHT, who's also part of the potential health hub in the community. They spoke to Martina and to Ben. Ben is the leader of the Brant sub-region, and Martina is the head of the LHIN. In those discussions, it was brought to their attention what the hub would look like, excluding urgent care, because we're not talking about urgent care. That's not part of our forte. That's part of the Brant County healthcare system. So in that discussion with the FHT, they were talking about the potential of the health hub that where they're looking at moving forward And the Lynn was very impressed with that and wants it to move forward. Counselor Boma.
Point of order, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. I appreciate the discussion, and I think we should have that discussion, and I appreciate the update, but I don't know if that has anything to do with the recommendation that we're talking about.
Actually, it does, because it talks about the health hub.
But the economic development is asking us to do
Yes.
something, and your report has nothing to do with this recommendation from economic development, so.
Point
I'd
of
love to hear that
information.
update. Yeah.
Counselor Simons?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I may add, I think I heard you say the urgent care has nothing to do with the health hub.
That's correct.
I thought the urgent care was the main focus of what we were trying to get put back into our community.
Again, point of order, Mr. Chair, is that is not relevant to this current
Correct.
conversation.
It's coming up later in other parts of the
Thank you.
committee reports tonight. Thank you. Mayor Eddy?
Speaking to the item 3 in the recommendation, it would be absolutely incorrect for this council to support a feasibility study before we know the outcome of the meeting with the various parties that have jurisdiction, so that we will know whether a feasibility study is required or not. It may be, but it may not be, so it's important to have the meetings first and have a report
Thank you, Your Worship.
on them. Thank you.
CO Emerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the last, I think it was the last council meeting, or maybe the one before, I think it was the last one.
It was.
Council directed the mayor and myself to meet with the new supervisors to come in for the Brant Community Healthcare System and other people and prepare a report back. So that was the leadership role that this council has taken. And as the mayor was saying, we have a meeting set up with the supervisor, we have a meeting set up with the sub-region of the Lynn, we have a meeting set up with the family health team chair and the head of the doctors with the family health. And there'll be other meetings to come, and we'll be reporting back to this council as directed.
Thank you.
I think we should. Do we have a motion on the
Yes, we do, Your
floor?
Worship.
And it is,
It's these three.
the motion, please.
These three.
As per the recommendation, there is a recommendation there. We're going to put the
Well,
question.
I request the council to vote against that resolution because one has already been, the recommendation already been carried out. Two, it's up to the board, the hub board, to decide how they circulated their minutes. And thirdly, we shouldn't proceed with a feasibility study until we have the relevant information from the various concerned parties to determine whether in fact we need to proceed with one or not. So I would ask the members of council to consider voting against that resolution.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor of the resolution, or the, recommendation? Opposed? Defeated, thank you. B, Tourism Advisory Committee Report.
We need a motion.
If I could make a motion, just to receive the information from the economic development.
Thank you. Seconder, Counselor Simons?
Can I add part to that motion, if I may, friendly remember?
I was waiting for your hand to go.
Friendly? Okay, I would like to see a friendly amendment that the report of August 29th for information and discussion from CEO Paul Emerson and Michael Bradley be forwarded to the Economic Development Committee for their review, if I may. Is that a friendly amendment?
That's-
I think so.
Okay,
Is that okay with Counselor Boma?
fine with me, sir.
Questions or concerns? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving on, 8B, Tourism Committee Report. There's a recommendation. Counselor Boma? Seconder, Counselor Peters. Questions or concerns? Counselor Gatward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 2,
Yes.
potential benefits of an increase in the staff complement.
Be explored.
We have 2 people currently that work in the tourism department, is that correct?
Yes.
And we have 2 people that work in economic development.
Yes.
So I believe in the past, economic development asked for additional staff, and that was turned down through the budget. So why would we support an additional person in tourism?
We're not supporting, it says to explore.
Counselor Weed? Counselor Boma, please.
He took the words out of my mouth.
Thank you.
We're not doing that.
Please adjust the chair first, Counselor Weed. Thank you. Thank you.
No, that's true. True. Explore.
Any other comments? Counselor Powell, please.
Comment in number 2. I think when we look back at the special events this year in Brant County, and if you're downtown Paris on the weekend this summer, and you see the volume of visitors, the parking situation, it's like we've turned a leaf and the rest of Ontario has discovered Paris and it's become a destination place. So I would support, if the staff is able to kind of analyze what happened, so to speak, and from that observation and analysis, maybe adding staff, or there may be other recommendations that would come out of that, because whatever happened this past year, we want to duplicate, improve on, and keep it going as far as tourism goes.
Thank you, and I think CAO Emerson may be able to enlighten us a bit on that. Paul?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We can address this through budget. We have some ideas and some thoughts, and that's coming up in another month. So if you'd let us just work with this, and we'll bring back something to you.
Thank you. We do have a recommendation, I believe, on the floor. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Staff reports, corporate services, general manager's update, please. Ms. Hewitt?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to advise you, staff is looking at obtaining a scope of work and pricing for conducting a space analysis at both the Burford and Paris offices. We need to look at a short-term, immediate plan and a longer-term strategy for how we're going to place staff. Also, I wanted to advise that the OPP station planning is well underway and that we should have concept drawings for the detachment committee in the very near future. And the budget planning, we're deep in the throes of the budget, and we're right on track for having our presentation to all of you in November.
Thank you, Ms. Hewitt. Any questions? Councillor Gatward, please.
Thank you. When will the detachment committee see the concept drawings?
As soon as we have an agreed-to concept drawing with the OPP completed, then we'll bring them to the detachment committee. So we're meeting with them tomorrow, and I'm not sure if we'll need another meeting after that, or if we'll be able to bring something shortly after that. But
thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Hewitt.
Thank you.
Moving on to operations, please. Mr. Bradley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Outside of the updates that I'll be giving to Public Works and Community Services over the next week or so, just a few items of interest, I think, for committee. Methane capture comes up every once in a while in the context of landfills. Yeah. So Mr. Noble, Matt DeHunt, and myself are meeting with a company tomorrow that actually has some what we'd call small-scale methane capture solutions. So very high level at this point, but it's something that we are always keeping in the back of our mind. There's always methane coming out of the landfills, and that material could be captured. The economics of it has never really quite been determined, but I think it's good that we're going to we're continue to look into this, look at this small-scale device, so. I'll be updating committee on that, depending on how that meeting goes. So, one thing that was approved in this year's budget that we've been working on is an ambulance facilities needs study. So we know that our ambulance service is growing, and we're going to have continued need for new facilities. And so that has been ongoing, and we have a team meeting this coming Friday. So I expect that will finalize in the mid-fall, and then we'll bring the results of that study to this committee. The budget needs for future ambulance facilities are quite a ways down the road, probably 2 or 3 years from now. So another study that we have on the go is the transit needs study. So it's marching along very well. It is on schedule. All the public consultation has been done, and the peer review has now been completed. And so we are still on schedule to bring, I think, the results of that to council in mid-fall. So
that's good
I think
news.
that's a good project that's well needed. The PIC for the Bishopsgate Road interchange, for that EA, the last PIC is scheduled for a week today. There has been no changes to the final design recommendation from the last PIC, so it's just really some cleanup items and present the final design to the public. I think we've resolved most of the outstanding issues. There's a few little ones, but we should have a final EA in about a month's time after the 30-day appeal period, or 30-day comment period, so. And just a few things BME is working on, the Adidas solar project. It's a 600 kilowatt solar project on the roof of Adidas, and it's actually, I think it started today. So we started, I think, putting up the initial racking today, and the panel should be going up over the next couple of weeks. And we anticipate that the Scotland Community Center, there's a small, I think, 100 kilowatt project for the Scotland Community Center will be starting mid to late October. It's only about a 3-week project, so we should be well in line to get it in place by the winter. And I do owe committee a report on solar revenues. I have the numbers, I just couldn't get the report done in time for this meeting, but I can report that our revenues on our solar portfolio generated a 20% ROI in 2016. Wow. So that there was good investments that we've made in the past, Mr. Chair. And I'll bring a more fulsome report on those.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Any questions? Councillor Miller, please.
The methane capture on the landfill, if we get that approval, once we get that going to the size we want, we have to have it done anyways, do we not? I'm pretty sure that's legislation.
Mr. Chair, I'm vague on the legislation. I know that there is some pending legislation, but a lot of it's, I think, I think there has to be a way of attenuating methane. I know there has to be captured and converted into electricity. But again, we're in a learning curve with that now, so we'll be.
We'll definitely be over the, I don't know, about 500,000 tons or cubic meters or whatever it is. We'll definitely be over that size, and that's why I knew about, because I did mention to Brooke a couple of years ago about that. And one of the things I don't know, maybe you can bring this up, is whether you generate electricity on site or you can filter it and put it in the natural gas system as well. That's another option too.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Boma and then Councillor Simons.
Just if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, Michael, that you were talking about the ambulance facilities needs study, and of course, we're building a new OPP station and maybe thinking about doing something on the east end as far as the community center goes. Will all of those thoughts be going into that facilities needs study? I know they will be, but I just wanted to hear you say it.
Yep. Mr. Chair, at a very high level, we've analyzed the kind of the projected growth of the two communities to determine where our facilities, future facilities needs. We've also done an analysis of all existing city and county properties, because we serve both communities, and then we'll basically bind those two kind of differing pieces of data together, and then we'll make facilities recommendations based on that. So.
Councillor Simons?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the presenter. Michael, first of all, Brantford is already utilizing their methane at their landfill, and for putting in the grid, of course. And secondly, the dam in Paris, do you have any ideas, the time elements it will be before we put we have to fix the dam, I know, sure, and then to put the solar on the dam. Is there any insight into time elements?
Sure, Mr. Chair. That's a project that I'm carrying. It's a long project. We visualize it as a 6-year project. We've got 6 years basically to get the turbines in place to meet the terms of our FIT contract. So I actually just, and it's coincidental, but I met with an engineer that's been doing some, what I would call, some planning work for me on the project on Friday, because, I mean, it's a bit of a complex approval process, and it's hard to peg down exactly what the approval process is. So they're helping us out with that. But I would be hoping to be in a position to release an RFP for basically design and project management late next year. We should have everything in place by then to do that, so.
Okay, thank you.
One question, Mr. Bradley, in regards to the solar on the Adidas. After completion, how long does it usually take for the hookup to be completed to the feed-in tariff?
Sure, Mr. Chair, it takes us usually, I think there's usually about a 6-month gap there, so, you know, we often the facilities will be generating electricity for 2 or 3 months before we actually start to get the revenues in, just because it takes it that long to get through the system, but they're getting better. Every year we see an improvement in that. So, you know, for example, I think we completed the Burford project, you know, late last fall, November-ish of last fall, and I think it was April before we were what we call fully hooked up and commissioned, so.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Adidas project, is that a joint project with other communities surrounding us?
Mr. Chair, the intent for that project was it was a partnership between Six Nations, Adidas, and the county. That was one of the accommodation projects from the Green Energy Accord that we approved a few years ago. So.
Thank you. And the Scotland Community Centre is straight ours?
Scotland Community Centre is 100% county owned. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley, for your report. We have 9C, Development Services. You'll see there that our Chief Building Official has a recommendation there for wall improvements for Cobblestone Common by Mr. Gravel. There is a recommendation. Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will move the recommendation, and I'd like to speak to it if I...
Thank you. Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Pierce. Go ahead, Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Andre. These are great. I did not see the second one until tonight. I
can put them, if you want to put them up.
It's, well, the question I have, David Powell, has he been privy to these concepts? Because he originally was the designer, I think, at the very beginning of this strategy, I think, at one time. Has he been privy to what's going on?
Yes, he has.
And is he in favor of all this now?
Yes. He's out of the country right now.
Yes.
But back in May, the CEO approached me to finish this project off and to take control of it and to make sure this project moves forward. Since then, I've been in contact with different members of the Renaissance Committee and Mr. Powell through telephone and emails, and I have forwarded him he provided a design which was not really acceptable, but we've modified it to incorporate some of his styles, and that's the end result is this plan.
Okay.
So we just want to move forward with this so we can get this built.
And he's in favor of this then?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Andre.
One more
Councillor
question.
Simons, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and because it is the first time I've seen it, it is white panels where it shows white panels on the second drawing?
Yes, option 1 shows white panels throughout, and then
Option 1,
option
I guess,
2
yeah.
is more solid color.
Yeah, so it's white all the way through then with dark charcoal gray and black, is that it?
Yes. So we decided to go, the best, talking to community services for maintenance, it's best we go with one solid color with different shadow effects. It's a lot easier to maintain. The white will fade and stain and things like that, so.
So we're looking at recommendation number 2?
Yes.
Option 2 is the
Option 2, which is up.
This one, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Powell, please.
Looking at the wall there and looking at the one further north on Grand River Street, the Civics building, where you have a graphic, artistic design with colors. Was something like that ruled out, or it would seem to fit in very well with the historical part of Paris to have something to do with the river and gypsum mines and our history, etc., to actually visually portray something about our community?
Through Mr. Chair, we never looked at doing a mural at all because we didn't want it to depict away from the other one that was going to be, I'm assuming is going to be redone. And plus, this is, the park name was Cobblestone Common, and we wanted to keep with the cobblestone theme throughout. So we never looked at doing a mural at that time throughout this process.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Andre. There is a recommendation on the floor. Recommendation is option 2. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. General Manager's update, please. Thank you, Mr. Pomponi.
Just a few things. I wanted to update you on the job preview we had for the development engineering position. It went well. The position hasn't been filled. It's really in the hands of the potential applicant or the applicant. And when we hear something, we'll let you know. That was one of 2 positions. We haven't acted yet on the second position yet. Also, the fee review, I wanted to give you an update. We are having a conference call tomorrow, which is pretty much our kickoff of the fee review. Part of what staff has to do is look at all the areas that are different departments, different staff who are involved in applications, who works on what. That's part of the, I'm going to say, accounting that we do on processing applications. We're going to be getting into probably more in-depth, rigorous discussions in, we're looking at the first week in October. We're still scheduling it, hasn't happened yet, but we're still in the process of scheduling those. And just one other thing, I'm going to be on vacation for a few weeks, so if you don't see me around the office, it'll be my first vacation in a couple of years, so.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions? Councillor Gatward, please.
Thank you. The presentation that we had as part of the delegations from Mr. Young and his colleague, did you receive one of these?
No, I'm familiar with the company. Actually, when we were consulting, we hired RWDI to do some work for us.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure as part of our overall planning for the county of Brant and the big picture, you try to take in the climate change information that they have brought to us into account?
Sure. I could say part of the stuff plays into the LID stuff that we're doing. So when we're doing modeling and that, it's basically the information that's given to us on forecasting and things like that, such as storm events. Those things factor into stormwater management reports and modeling. So we are reliant upon it. I would say that we are more reactive to information that is brought to us from down from the provincial level. What they have talked about here, from what I recall, we'll get into other things which could also have implications on disaster management and emergency management. I think the implications, potentially what they're showing here, and I'm going to speculate on what they're trying to do, is to look at, the implications of climate change are quite broad. It will affect things such as detailed planning, when we look at infiltration rates, things like that, but also has implications much beyond just development. It has implications on emergency management and having to deal with some of those, the outfall of it, I guess.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. Moving along to General Manager's update for Economic Development and Strategic Investment. Ms. Newton, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I only have a couple of updates. As often happens, as the summer winds down, we've seen an uptick in a lot of the inquiries that we're getting in regards to development. We've had 2 new CIP applications come in the last 2 weeks. And we only have one that's actually moving forward right now, being the one you just heard about, the Two Rivers Wall. So we're glad to see those coming forward after several meetings that spanned over the last few months. And we also have a number of the development inquiries that we've been working on seem to be firming up and coming to fruition. So I hope to bring our report forward at the next CEC, if not the next council meeting, for council to decide on those. The wayfinding strategy that we've been working on is complete as far as Phase 1 goes. We're now moving into the design, placement, and implementation phase, which will be complete in about 2 months. So we'll be bringing that forward also. And aside from that, we've really been getting ready as far as the move into Wincy Mills goes, and we will keep you posted on the progress of that.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Moving forward to communications, we have a item for Hamilton Regional, Hamilton, Niagara, Haldeman, Brant Local Health Integrated Network, Sub-Region Planning and Estimating of Anchor Table's invitation for member of HNHB Lynn team to meet with staff committee. Wow. And if you can figure that out, actually, I believe what it is the Lynn wants to meet with members of our staff to discuss the future of the hub. And if I may, thank you, Councillor Boma, for bringing it up. I should have brought up here what I have been involved with the family health team and their group. We met with the Lynn, who was Martina Rosa and Ben Danon, who is the sub-region anchor for the Lynn, and we were discussing what we feel the hub would look like from the hub committee. They were very enthused about it, actually. What they had said to us was, verbatim, was leave a spot potentially for an urgent care. We understand now at the committee, and I'm talking the Health Hub Committee, we have no say in what happens with the urgent care. That's going to be brought up, as Mr. Emerson and Mr. Bradley brought out in their reports. That's going to come up in the talks with the new established committee, I'm sure, of the Brant County Healthcare System, whoever that may be, and the new supervisor and staff. All we can do is say, you know, how we feel about it as a council, as the city does, as the hub does. The hub was told by Martina and Ben, and when I say hub, I'm not talking about the county as a community group. I'm talking about the health hub, was to move forward. There's 13 different government agencies who are putting money into this, to this hub. And they would like to have the urgent care in there, and Mayor Eddy knows that. He sits on it as well. But the end game, we really don't know what the end game is until the Minister of Health determines what that end game is. But we are going to move along as a health hub, looking at a newer, better option for the county and the city itself under the Brant County Healthcare System. So that's where we're going with that. But there will not be a push or move by us to have the urgent care there because we have no say in that. Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that conversation because I was kind of a wee bit confused. Can you give us an example of what you're thinking about as far as potential users of the health hub?
Sure. So we're looking at, we have people from, so they need to expand the FHT, the family health team. They need to have more doctors. They need to, they're going to add, so you'll still have your x-ray, you'll have your blood work, you'll have mental health care, you'll have physio, you'll have cardio workout systems, you'll have someone who's interested in putting a gym in, you have a chiropractor, you have pharmaceutical, so anything integrated in mental health even will be integrated in there, and there's 13 different groups that meet regularly to push this forward, and we've begun to understand that it's going to be up to the Lynn where the urgent care goes. So that's why we met with them in person to say to them where we were in our process, and I have to tell you they were very impressed. They were saying that other communities aren't even close to being that far. There's too many other individual groups trying to do their own thing, where we've brought all the groups together to do one thing, which they said is very good.
If I may have one
Sure.
follow-up question. So this will be a health hub, and it will be integrated into the Hamilton Community Health Working Group. Is that what it is? So there's 3 or 4 different groups.
Yeah.
Niagara, and we're the Hamilton Community Health.
We're a subgroup.
So we're going to have this building.
Yeah.
That's going to serve Hamilton and all the.
No. This is not Hamilton. This is the Brant sub-region.
So it's going to be the Brant sub-region. It only supplies services then?
No, you can't say that because anybody can come from anywhere to get
Well, yes,
services.
that's true, but mainly service.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, if I could, I need to kind of discuss a statement you said there. You said as the hub, we're not going to push to have the urgent care within the hub because we have no say in whether it's in there or not. That may be, but I would suggest that at every conversation, we push and we push and we push and we tell them we want it there, we tell them we want it there. I think the more they hear it, whether we have a say or not, it may influence them potentially to put it there.
Yeah.
So I've got to tell you, I disagree with that strategy of not discussing it. To me, it should be in every conversation.
I can tell you that because we've probably had 8 or 9 conversations with them about the urgent care and where it stands and what we feel, we've gotten to the point now we've saturated it. And I mean saturation in the sense of they know full well after what's happened in Paris over the last 30 years with healthcare, as Dr. McDonald has said, you know what happened the last time they tried to take our hospital away. Well, we're not a hospital anymore for 25 years. We've been an urgent care center.
That's right.
People call it the Willett Hospital. It's not a hospital, it's an urgent care center. And you're going to see a change in urgent care and how it's delivered, and that's what the LHIN is trying to do, is to develop this. But in no way do we not want it there. They know we want it there, but we can't make them put it there.
No,
That's what I'm trying to say.
No, and I appreciate that. Okay, with the added text you just put there, that's fine. But like I say, I think it's vital that
Absolutely.
that every turn we tell them that we want it,
Absolutely.
we want it. Okay, thank you.
And following that meeting, there was, so that was a meeting just with the FHT board and the hub board. After that, we stayed for the Brant sub-region anchor table meeting, and we're on that committee now, so we'll be dealing with the Brant sub-region, which is Ben. We'll be dealing with him once a month at a meeting. And that particular item will be coming up all the time, and he knows it. Perfect. And there will be a co-chair as well, because he may not be able to make it to all those meetings, so. Councillor Powell.
Just a comment about this page 2, the anchor table. In the past, we had Ontario Regional Health Units, and then they flipped over to LHINs. I think we have 12 or 16 of them. With an executive, the one for our area is the extremely well reimbursed, up in the 250,000 plus. She has assistants, they have executive, they have a board of directors. Now they have to have an office building to put all this in, and then they have some sub-regions or subcommittees, and now we're going to have an anchor table. So you would start out with, let's put out applications, who wants to join on this? Let's do a mandate about our vision statement, et cetera, et cetera. Point I'm getting at, we are putting a lot of administration into our health, and it's coming out of our health doctors, which I feel could be far better used for actual health for patients. Now, a very simplified version, we have the John Noble Home. They have an administrator and they have a board. They saw a problem, they looked at it, they decided to add more apartments. They put it out for proposals. We have an excellent person who's putting that building up. I'm sure it'll come in on budget, on time. So local people making local decisions, as opposed to all of this, we keep generating more administration and more administration, more studies, and it just seems like it's killing what we really should be doing.
Yeah, and I would
That's
agree.
my viewpoint.
I would agree, Councillor Powell, but the good thing about the the Brant sub-region is. They've identified the need for that sub-region because it's specific to the region. So that's why we get to sit on that table and make, so you'll see here what it says for membership, and it's got acute care, home and community care. I mean, it just goes down, and all those people from this area are sitting at that table. That's who needs to be there. Before, there weren't those people at the table. It was just coming from the ministry's office, and they were making the decision. So now we're getting into those regions where we're actually having a say in it, which I think is great, because this is the time where we have to say, thank you for giving us the opportunity, and this is what we need to do.
Not to be critical, but BGH had a board. How far did that go? How well did it serve this community over the X number of years?
All I can say about that is, Mr. Councillor Powell, is when we had members of councils from the city and the county on the board, it had surpluses. When they were taken off, there were deficits. That's all I can say about that. Anyways, so moving along, communications, do we need approval of that? Accept the communications? To receive? Can we have a motion to receive? Councillor Wheat, Councillor Boma, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Matters referred by council, there is none. Other business, Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and during my course of trying to find out who our council rep was on BME, I found we did not have one, and I'm wondering if we could appoint one, either tonight or maybe at the next council meeting when the two gentlemen on either side of me are here.
Well, we do have a council rep, his worship's on the committee.
But we also have a council member.
Yeah, we had a council member on there, and it was brought up about 6 months ago here that it was no longer, I was no longer on. So, I'm sorry, Councillor Miller, you would like to make a motion to add?
Well, I could do it tonight, or I can wait till council, when we're, both Councillor Coleman and Councillor Chambers might be willing to sit on it as well.
Council needs to approve it anyways, so
Yeah.
either one.
So either way, you can do it?
I'll bring it forward in the next council.
Thank you. CAO's update, please. CAO Emerson?
I think Councillor Powell had.
Oh, Councillor Powell.
If I may just take a minute, I had thought of this at the beginning. When I was in Hamilton last week and the clerk took my information, she noticed I was from Paris. She said, "Is Paris that quiet, stiff, sleepy, not much happening in town still?"
Yeah.
And I've encouraged her every time I go back, you've got to come and visit Paris for a day and see all the improvements. So there's still a few people up there that haven't heard of us. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. CAO Emerson?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of quick things. There was a opening, some of us were at for King Package Materials, fairly large addition, over 100,000 square feet, I believe, and has solidified that company's presence in the area, and that was a good thing. Our quarterly manager group got together, and we had Lucy Marco come from the Age-Friendly Communities Group, and she's made presentations here before, and she made a presentation to our broader staff team, and I think that was quite important. It continued to plant the seeds in people's minds as to being more aware and looking for opportunities to make our communities more accessible. A couple of councillors had asked me how were we making out in implementing the Performance Concepts Consulting recommendations. That was Todd's recommendations on development services. I was going to jump in when Rob was making his presentation, but he talked about fuel, muscle, and process. So on the fuel side, that's the fees. So they were a number of recommendations coming out of Todd's report on looking at fee structure in planning and building and anywhere we can get our fees up to provide some fuel. So we're looking at that. Recommendations will be coming forward through the budget cycle to you. On the muscle side, that's mainly the staff resources. As Mark was saying, there's been a new counter person hired in building. They're looking for 2 development engineer positions And there are a number of building inspectors that will be coming on at some point in the future when Andre feels it's the time to pull the trigger on that one. So we are working on providing more muscle, so to speak, and there may be some other positions come forward through budget with respect to planning and so on. And finally, on the process side, there are a number of things being looked at. There's a new workflow software. It's been around for a while, but it's being used more efficiently now. Looking at processes, we're always looking for opportunities for improvement. Work with the development industry and whoever wants to try and make sure our processes are more streamlined. So that's a quick verbal update. I can I'll provide you with a written report on this, maybe a little further on as to where we are in all those recommendations. And finally, there have been some discussion around about the council salaries. And so we as staff are going to bring forward through budget, there'll be a line item in there to do a review and to look at salaries, just as we do with staff, relative to other municipalities. So you at that point as a council can decide whether you want us to pursue that or not, but we'll bring it forward so it's not as embarrassing for council. But I can tell you that as we try and do with our staff, and any good organization does, you try and make sure that your salaries are up at a level that you think they should be relative to where you're competing for people and so on, and that's what we do with the staff. We're trying to hit the middle quadrant. I think, and a number of us think, and people on the street and other members of council spoke to me, that council should be afforded the same respect and courtesy. So we'll have a look. You can make the decision later on whether you want to do anything about it.
Thank you, CO Emerson. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Paul. Couple things, I guess. The first thing that comes to mind with that, if we're voting on something as a council to potentially give ourselves a raise, is that not pecuniary interest?
It would be for the next council cycle. So we're in the last year. So you could do the review, you could authorize the review, we have a look at the review, and then that would be something for the next council.
Okay, so that's fine. That makes me feel a little bit better in that sense. But part B of that, and forgive me around this table for saying this, but I'm hoping that we're not in this for the money.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not, I just want that to be said, that it's not for the money that
that's right.
We're doing this. So I appreciate where you're going with this, but I don't know,
We felt, based on conversations, and we discussed it at a staff level, that it'd be prudent for us to put it on the table. You can decide as a corporation whether you want to pursue that or not. You're the board of directors. You have the final say.
Any other questions? Thank you, Paul. Motion to go in camera. Councillor Simons, Councillor Powell, all in favor? Thank you. 2 minutes.
Thank you.